The encounter by the roadside. The sun beat down mercilessly on that time-forgotten afternoon. The wind whipped red dust along the shoulder, and the dirt road seemed to stretch on forever, as if determined to carry away all who dared to traverse it without a clear destination. It was one of those days when even time seemed suspended, and it was precisely there that she saw him for the first time. He approached slowly on horseback, his hat pulled forward, obscuring part of his face. His clothes were worn, stained with road grime, and the horse's saddle creaked with every step. To anyone else, he was just another man, fleeing something or himself, but something about him caught her attention. Perhaps it was the way he gazed at the horizon, as if searching for something he couldn't quite define himself. Sophia, the young woman driving that old blue pickup truck, was returning from the neighboring town where she had made some deliveries for her family's small general store. When she saw the man by the roadside, something inside her made her lift her foot from the accelerator. A premonition, perhaps, or just curiosity. But it wasn't common to see someone alone on that forgotten stretch of the world, much less on horseback. She pulled the truck over a few yards from where he was passing and rolled down the window. "Is everything all right over there?" she asked with a cautious but gentle smile. He stopped his horse, slowly raised his face, revealing deep brown eyes marked by discreet wrinkles, as if each one carried an untold story. There was weariness in his gaze, but also something more, something Sophia couldn't quite name, perhaps loneliness, perhaps longing. "Everything's fine, miss. Just traveling on," he replied in a hoarse voice, like someone who hadn't spoken to anyone in days, maybe weeks. She hesitated for a second. Then she looked at the passenger seat where there was a bottle of water and a piece of corn cake wrapped in paper. She picked up both and extended them through the window. "Here, I don't know where you're going, but this sun is unforgiving." He accepted them awkwardly, almost surprised by the kindness. He thanked her with a discreet nod, and he was already preparing to continue on his way when she asked, "Do you have somewhere to sleep tonight?" The question hung in the air for a few seconds, like a leaf before it falls. "The sky has been my roof for a long time," he replied, with a half-smile that hid more than it revealed. It was at that instant that Sophia felt, and she wouldn't be able to explain why, that this was no ordinary man. That there was more there than dust and silence. There was a story waiting to be told, one that no one had truly heard yet. "If you want, there's a barn at my place. It's not a five-star hotel, but it's clean, has dry hay, and hot coffee in the morning." He hesitated. He was used to not accepting favors, to trusting only his own horse, the wind, and time. But something in her tone, something in the lightness of that offer, disarmed him from within. "I think the horse will like it," he replied, and this time the smile was almost genuine. And so, without promises, without plans, a story began that Sophia would never forget. She thought she had offered shelter to a mere stranger. Little did she know, she had just crossed paths with a living legend, buried under the weight of time and pain. A legend who, for now, chose to hide behind the silence of an old hat and a name he no longer used. The silence and eyes that carried secrets. The barn was simple but welcoming. Sophia helped prepare a corner with fresh hay and left a blanket nearby. The man, still without saying his name, carefully settled his horse, as if the animal were his only family. He asked for nothing, complained about nothing. He simply nodded with a calm, almost resigned look. At night, the breeze brought the scent of old wood and freshly brewed coffee. Sophia was on the porch, watching the starry sky, when she heard light footsteps on the packed earth. It was him. He walked slowly, like someone who had forgotten how to approach people. His boots made a dry sound, and each step seemed to measure the space between him and the world. "Want some coffee?" she offered, extending an old ceramic mug. He took it without a word, but nodded in thanks. He sat on the lowest step of the porch, in silence, and so they remained for a while, not speaking, just listening to the crickets and feeling time pass with the slowness of someone in no hurry. But Sophia watched. She was always good at that, at noticing what wasn't said. And what she saw in that man was more than physical exhaustion. It was a weariness of the soul, as if he carried an invisible weight on his shoulders, as if he had left something behind, or someone. "What are you running from?" she asked lightly, as if tossing the question to the wind, not expecting an answer. He didn't reply immediately. He just looked straight ahead, his eyes lost in the darkness beyond the fence. And then, finally, he spoke. "Myself, perhaps." The answer hung in the air, heavy. Sophia felt a shiver. It wasn't fear, it was empathy. The feeling that this man had lived things he no longer wanted to remember.
"The road can be deceiving," she said. "Sometimes we think we're getting away from something, but we're heading straight for what we most need to face." He turned his head slightly. For the first time, he looked at her for a few seconds, and in his eyes she saw everything. The ancient sadness, the quiet anger, the pain he tried to hide behind his stubble and the dust on his hat. But she also saw something else, something subtle, a longing for someone, or for himself perhaps. "You talk as if you've run away too," he commented, almost in a whisper. Sophia gave a bitter smile. "I have, but I reached a point where running started to hurt more than staying." He gave a slight half-smile, as if those words had touched a dormant part within him. He took the last sip of coffee and fell silent again. She wanted to ask more, to know who he was, where he came from, why he carried so much sadness in his gaze. But something told her it was too soon, that certain wounds only open when the soul finds safety. That night, he returned to the barn without another word. But looking back, he exchanged one last glance with her. A look that said, "Thank you, for not asking too much, for not judging, for seeing." And Sophia knew. Before her wasn't just a man marked by time, but someone who had lived more than many could bear. And yet he remained there, whole, even if broken inside. A man the world had forgotten, but who still carried in his eyes the flame of something that would never extinguish. A secret, a story, a legend hidden behind the silence. The help that would change everything. The sky was still a whitish gray the next morning when Sophia woke to the sound of an axe hitting wood. For a second, she thought she was dreaming. But when she stepped out the back door, there he was, standing, his back to her, splitting logs with firm, silent movements. The soft morning light outlined the man's silhouette amidst the cold smoke rising from the earth. She approached slowly, a mug of hot coffee in her hands. She watched for a moment before speaking. Each blow he struck seemed to carry more than just strength. It seemed to release memories, as if he were trying to cut, along with the wood, everything that still haunted him. "I thought you'd be gone early," she said, handing him the coffee. He accepted it without protest. He nodded, but didn't explain why he had stayed. "I don't like being in debt," he replied after a moment. Sophia smiled. "Nobody's asking for anything." But he didn't smile back. He just took a sip and returned his gaze to the logs at his feet, as if that was easier to face than any conversation. That morning unfolded like so many others on the farm. Simple, silent, made of small gestures and routine tasks. But there was something different in the air, something you couldn't see, only feel. As if, little by little, He was allowing the world to seep through the cracks of his armor. Sophia didn't know his name yet, but she already knew he was unusual. While feeding the chickens, she caught a glimpse of him stopping in front of the large tree at the end of the property. He stood there, motionless, for long minutes. It seemed as if he knew that place, as if that ground had belonged to him somehow, in some distant time. Later, as they ate lunch together on the porch, Sophia decided to do something she rarely did: trust. "This farm belonged to my grandfather," she shared. "He bought it with great sacrifice after he came back from the war. He said this was the only place where time moved at the heart's pace." He listened in silence, chewing slowly, but she saw the slight movement in his eyes, as if a memory had been ignited within him. "What was your grandfather's name?" he asked, almost casually, but with a subtle tension in his voice. "Jonas Abreu." He didn't react immediately. He just lowered his gaze to his empty plate and tightened his fingers around the glass. Sophia felt she had touched something, but she didn't press him. Silence, sometimes, says more than any question. That afternoon, when the weather warmed and the wind died down, he offered to help with the back fence maintenance. They worked side by side, not speaking much, but there was an invisible communication between them, something that didn't need words. At the end of the day, when both were covered in dust and sweat, Sophia looked at him sincerely and said, "If you want to stay a few more days, you can. Sometimes we need a break before moving on." He nodded. He didn't say thank you, he didn't say yes, but he stayed, and that, for him, was saying a lot. What Sophia didn't know yet was that this small gesture of help, that simple invitation, was about to change everything. For him and for her. Because that man carried a buried story, and she, unknowingly, was digging the first layer. From then on, nothing would ever be the same. The abandoned farm and the echoes of the past. The third day began with a different kind of silence, a dense silence, laden with something Sophia couldn't name, but felt in the air like an ancient scent kept too long. The man, still nameless, woke early, as usual, but that day there was a purpose in the way he pulled on his boots and adjusted his hat. It wasn't just habit, it was a farewell, or perhaps a return. Sophia watched him from the porch as he saddled his horse. There was something in his gestures that seemed firmer, as if he had made a decision during the night. "Are you leaving?" she asked, her voice low. He hesitated for a moment, then met her gaze. "I need to see a place, not far from here." She wanted to ask more, but held back. Instead, she simply said, "Do you want me to come with you?" He hesitated. For the first time, his silence didn't seem like a refusal, but a disguised request. In the end, he just nodded slightly. They got into Sophia's pickup truck and drove down a narrow dirt road, surrounded by fields that time had forgotten. After about 15 minutes, he asked her to turn left onto an almost invisible path hidden among the trees. Sophia frowned. "Here? There's nothing else around these parts." "Yes, there is," he replied, his voice low. As the brush grew taller and denser, Sophia began to glimpse a structure faded by time in the distance. An old, large wooden farm with a wide porch and broken-paned windows. Tall weeds consumed the entrance, and the roof sagged in places. It was a skeleton of something that was once full of life. He got out of the car without a word. He stopped before the rusty gate and simply looked. His gaze, it wasn't one of surprise, it was one of longing. "This used to be my home," he said, his voice firm but choked. "Many years ago." Sophia remained silent. For the first time, a piece of the puzzle fell into place. "Are you one of the Santiago's sons?" she whispered. He nodded. "My name is Liam." The name hung in the air like a muffled thunderclap. That was the old Santiago farm, a place that had been known throughout the region as a symbol of prosperity. Cattle, livestock, milk, and cheese production, a traditional, respected family. But in a distant summer, everything crumbled. The patriarch died, the elder brother disappeared, and according to rumors, Liam had fled the town after a family dispute that no one ever truly understood. He passed through the gate with slow, almost ceremonial steps. He walked to the porch. He touched the wood as one would touch the skin of a loved one after years. In every wall, every crack, every broken window, there was a memory of childhood, of his mother singing, of his father calling his name, of stormy afternoons and long Sunday lunches.
Sophia followed him from a distance, respectfully. She watched as he entered the doorless house and remained inside for long minutes. Outside, all was silent, but inside, the ghosts danced. And he let them dance. When he returned, his eyes were wet. But he wasn't crying from pain. It was another kind of weeping, one that mixed regret with peace. "I needed to see this again," he said, looking at Sophia, "before deciding what to do with what little is left of me." And in that instant, she knew. Liam wasn't just a man wandering aimlessly. He was a living legend. Wounded, yes, but pulsating. A story the world tried to bury, but that was beginning to emerge from the ruins of his own past. And Sophia was at the center of this discovery. The legends about a man who disappeared. After that visit to the abandoned farm, Sophia could no longer look at Liam with the same eyes. Before, he was just a silent stranger, a wanderer with a past covered in dust. Now, he was part of the very land where she had grown up, a forgotten piece of a story that everyone seemed to have left behind, except him. In the neighboring village, stories about the Santiagos still circulated in bar conversations, in whispers at the market, and in discreet glances among the elders. When Sophia told her grandmother that she had met Liam, her grandmother's eyes widened and she dropped her wooden spoon into the pot. "Liam Santiago? Are you joking, child?" Sophia shook her head. Her grandmother slowly sat down, as if the memories were too heavy to bear while standing. That man, he vanished in the middle of the night, without a word. They said he killed his own brother over an inheritance. Others swear he ran away because he couldn't stand his father's abuses anymore. But the real truth, no one ever knew. Only legends remained. Sophia listened in silence. She no longer knew what was true, what was exaggerated, and what was an invention of time. "And do you believe it?" she asked. Her grandmother sighed deeply. People always create stories to fill the silence of others. But one thing is certain. Liam was no ordinary man. He had a sparkle in his eyes and too much shadow in his heart. Sophia returned home with her head full. And that same night, on the porch, she confronted the very protagonist of those legends. "They say a lot about you, you know." Liam looked at the sky in silence, as always. But this time he replied, "Let them talk. Everyone builds the myth they need. I just tried to survive." She moved closer. "Then tell me your version." He took a long time to answer. He took a sip of the cold coffee as if gaining courage from the bitter taste. And then he began, his voice hoarse with memory. "I was the youngest. My older brother Daniel was always my father's favorite. He was the businessman, the one who thought with his head. I was the one from the fields, the one who felt too much, spoke little, and fought against everything I thought was unfair." Sophia listened without interrupting. "After my father fell ill, the disputes began. Daniel wanted to sell the farm.
He thought land was worth nothing compared to money. I wouldn't accept it. That was our home. It was our family's history. We fought terribly. On the last day, he said I was a burden, useless, and if I didn't leave, he'd force me out. Liam paused for a moment. The pain still lingered in his eyes. I left that night, not out of fear, but to avoid doing something foolish. I never went back, not even when he died. I only found out years later. I wandered through places that meant nothing, until I passed by here and saw that old oak tree still standing. Then I knew it was time to return. Sophia swallowed hard. That wasn't a legend. It was a man who loved the land more than himself, who was silenced by a divided family and by a village that preferred mystery to truth. She touched his hand without a word, and for the first time, he didn't pull away. That night she understood. Behind the legends, the rumors, and the silences, there was a wounded heart, but still beating. And sometimes all a legend needs to be reborn is someone willing to listen. Here's the translation of the 6th part of the story, Bonds That Were Never Broken. In the days that followed, Liam didn't speak of the past anymore, but there was something different about his presence. His silence was no longer a wall. It was a plowed field where words could sprout at any moment. And Sophia, with her patient calm and ever-attentive gaze, understood this. They began working together daily. They repaired the old fence, renovated the chicken coop, and even started cleaning the old barn where he had slept on the first night. Over time, that place, once temporary, began to transform into a shelter. "You should stay around here," Sophia said one day, almost without looking at him, as she nailed a board. "The farm is too big for me alone." Liam just smiled that contained smile of his, but he didn't answer, as if, deep down, he was already staying, even without admitting it to himself.
That same afternoon, Sophia received an unexpected visit. Donna Hilda, an old family friend and one of the village's oldest residents. A woman with keen eyes and a sharp tongue who knew everything about everyone. "They told me you have a new man on the farm," she commented as she drank coffee on the porch. "A Liam." Sophia took a deep breath. "Yes, he's back." Donna Hilda set her cup down and looked steadily into Sophia's eyes. "Sophia, do you know who he is?" "I do, or at least I'm starting to understand." Hilda gave a slight smile, but it was a melancholic one. "His father, your Jonas, and he were very good friends. When you were a baby, Liam used to come here to help your grandfather with the harvest. He took care of the horses. He held you in his arms as if he were an older brother. I saw it with my own eyes." Sophia's eyes widened. She had never heard any of this, and suddenly she felt a strange chill in her stomach, as if a missing piece was about to fit and change the whole picture. "So, he already knew me?" "In a way you can't even imagine. When your mother fell ill, he used to bring medicine. When your father died, he was the one who helped your grandfather hold the coffin. But then, he disappeared, and no one spoke of him anymore." Those words echoed in Sophia's mind for the rest of the day. When the sun set and Liam returned from the field with dirt-stained hands and a distant look, she couldn't hold it in any longer. "Did you take care of me when I was little?" she asked directly, looking into his eyes. Liam stopped. He remained motionless. Then he lowered his gaze. "I did. Because you were all that was good in that place. And because—" he hesitated. "Because it was the last time I felt like I belonged somewhere." Sophia felt a lump in her throat. That man who arrived as a stranger was in fact an ancient link, forgotten by the folds of time, a bond never broken, only silenced by the years. "Why didn't you ever come back before?" she asked. He shrugged, his eyes moist. "Because I thought the world had moved on without me, and maybe it had,
until you gave me a plate of food and didn't ask questions." In that instant, Sophia understood that time doesn't erase everything. Some connections are stronger than distance, silence, or the passing years. They are made of presence, of small gestures, of buried memories, but alive. And there, on that simple porch, two hearts, one wounded, the other searching, met again, as if they had never been separated.
The day the past came knocking. That week seemed to be plucked from a timeless realm. Liam was no longer just a guest, he was part of the house, the land, the routine. His presence fit in like a memory that had always been there, only now resurfacing. But fate, as always, knows the right moment to knock on the door, and it doesn't always come with good intentions. That morning, Sophia was collecting eggs in the chicken coop when she heard the shrill honk of approaching pickup truck. It wasn't just any pickup. It was black, large, noisy, with tinted windows. A model too expensive for the region. And that, in itself, was enough to make her skin crawl. Liam was in the barn and came out instantly, as if he sensed what was coming. When the car door opened, the silence seemed to weigh heavily in the air. "Well, well, the man actually came back," said the firm, sharp voice of a fellow with an open button-down shirt, leather bracelets on his arm, and a cynical smile. Sophia didn't know him, but Liam did. "Hello, Marcelo," he said dryly. Marcelo was Daniel's son, Liam's nephew. He had his father's eyes, and his arrogance too. "I came to see if what they were saying was true, that the errant uncle decided to show up after 20-something years. And right here at old Jonas's granddaughter's farm? What a convenient coincidence." Sophia stepped forward. "This farm is mine, and I decide who stays." Marcelo smirked, barely looking at her. "I didn't come to cause trouble, just to remind my uncle here that he left some loose ends in the past, including a will and a debt." Liam remained still, his eyes fixed on the young man, but his face was expressionless. Sophia, on the other hand, felt her blood boil. "What debt?" "His name is still listed as an heir to part of the Santiago property. He just never claimed it. If he decides to come back now, he might end up stirring up things that were settled." "Is that your fear? That I'll decide to look into what's rightfully mine?" Liam finally spoke, firm. "No. My fear is you tarnishing my father's name. He may be dead, but around here, he's still remembered with respect." Liam took a slight step forward, confronting the young man. "What kills respect isn't time. It's the truth." Marcelo let out a nervous laugh, feigning contempt. But his eyes didn't lie. There was fear there. "You can play humble now, but everyone knows what you ran from." "And you know what I came back for," Liam replied. "I didn't come seeking revenge. I came seeking peace. And if you don't know what that means, then you're still a long way from being a man."
Marcelo scoffed, got back into his pickup without saying goodbye, and sped off down the road, tires squealing. When the noise faded, Sophia was still trembling, but Liam was calm. "He'll be back," she said, worried. "I know, but now I'm back too." He turned and slowly walked into the barn. Sophia stood looking at the horizon, feeling that something had changed. The past didn't just knock on the door. It entered, sat at the table, and demanded to be faced. But Liam was no longer the man who ran away, and Sophia was no longer just a farm girl. They were ready, together. Here's the translation of the final part of the story: the grandfather's last letter, and the secret in the old safe. The morning after Marcelo's visit, Sophia had barely slept. The tension still hung in the air like a storm that hadn't broken but promised to return with force. Liam, for his part, was more silent than usual. Not a distant silence, but a kind of deep introspection, as if he were digging within himself for something he had buried long ago. After coffee, Sophia decided to go through her grandfather's old room, which had remained closed since he passed away more than 5 years ago. The memories still hurt, but something unsettled her. Perhaps it was intuition. Perhaps it was the way Liam had looked at the door of that room days before, as if recognizing a guarded secret. As she pushed open the door, the scent of old wood, ancient books, and dust filled her senses. Nothing had been touched. The felt hat still hung on the same hook. The cane leaned in the corner. Everything there seemed frozen in time. While rummaging through the drawers, Sophia found a small wooden box with the old Santiago crest engraved on its lid. It was one of those boxes her grandfather always said should only be opened at the right time. With a racing heart, she turned the small key still attached to the back of the drawer, and the lid creaked open. Inside, there was a letter. The envelope bore her name handwritten, "To Sophia, when she is ready to know." Her hands trembled. She sat in the worn armchair, took a deep breath, and began to read. "My little Sophia, if you are reading this, it is because time has played its part. I have kept these words for years, waiting for you to grow not just in age, but in wisdom and courage. Your grandfather lived with many regrets, but none greater than witnessing in silence the injustice committed against Liam.
He was never guilty of what they said. Your father and his brother fought, yes, but it was Daniel who drove Liam away with lies and threats. I saw it, I heard it, and I kept silent. Perhaps out of fear, perhaps out of blind loyalty to an old friendship, but my silence cost him a lifetime of solitude. Liam took care of you when you were a baby. You smiled at him before you smiled at the world, and he loved you as if you were his own flesh and blood. There is a safe in the barn, under the loose floorboard in the right corner. Inside you will find Liam's father's true will, which was never delivered. If Liam is there, tell him my heart has finally found peace, and that he was always to me more a son than any other." Sophia put her hands to her face, her eyes welling up. She felt a mix of pain, guilt, and relief. Everything now made sense. Her grandfather's silences, the way he never spoke of Liam, the inexplicable tenderness with which he looked at his granddaughter on winter nights. Without wasting time, she ran to the barn. Liam was in the back, cleaning tools. "I need to show you something," she said without preamble. Together they pulled up the floorboards until they found the safe. Rust had almost conquered time, but the lock yielded. Inside, a yellowed envelope with an old seal and a firm signature. Joaquim Santiago. Liam recognized the paper, touched it as if it were a relic. "It's my father's handwriting," he read in silence. Sophia watched, holding back tears. When he finished, Liam sat on the floor, his hands trembling. "He left me everything, but they never gave it to me." Sophia knelt beside him, touching his hand firmly. "Then now it's time to reclaim what is yours, what has always been yours." And for the first time, Liam did not lower his eyes. He looked straight ahead, with something new in his chest, a new beginning. When justice comes, not by law, but by truth. In the days that followed the discovery of the original will, the atmosphere on the farm changed. It wasn't just the weight of an ancient document or the revelation of a forgotten inheritance. It was the truth, finally, breathing after years suffocated by silence. Liam walked taller, as if a burden had slipped from his shoulders, but even so, he hesitated. "I don't know if it's worth it," he confessed one night, sitting on the porch with Sophia.
stirring all this up, reopening old wounds. She turned to him, firm.
You've already lived half your life paying for a mistake you didn't commit. This isn't about revenge, Liam. It's about clearing your name, about being seen, again, with dignity.
He nodded slowly, but still there was fear. Not of the truth, but of what people would do with it. It was then that Sophia had a bold idea, to invite some old residents, family friends and neighbors for lunch at the farm. It wouldn't be a confrontation, it would be a reunion, and perhaps a chance for Liam to tell his story, with the right words. The following Sunday, the porch was full. Donna Hilda brought her famous cornmeal cake. Senor Elias, who hadn't left his house in months, showed up with his cane. Even people who swore they'd never set foot on that land again came out of curiosity, or perhaps longing. Liam watched everything with keen eyes. When Sophia stood up, gently tapping a spoon against a glass, silence slowly fell. You all know this land. Some grew up here, others worked on it. Many have heard stories. But today, I want you to hear the truth. From someone who lived what no one had the courage to tell. She looked at Liam, who slowly rose. He held no paper in his hands, only the truth in his heart. I left over 20 years ago, and left behind an unfinished story. They said I abandoned my family, that I turned my back on blood and honor. But what I abandoned, in truth, was the lie. Liam spoke of his brother, of the fight, of the fear of becoming what he hated. He spoke of his father, who had tried to reconcile, but was silenced by his own illness. He spoke of the pain of leaving, the guilt of never having returned, and finally, of the reunion with Sophia, and with the farm where it all began. The truth was buried for a long time, but it always finds a way to bloom. When he finished, there was no applause, nor was it needed. The silence there was different, no longer one of judgment, but of respect, of listening, of recognition. Donna Hilda was the first to rise. Your father would be proud, Liam. Then others came. Simple words, touches on the shoulder, looks that said more than any sentence. Marcelo, upon learning of the gathering, tried to react. He arrived 2 days later with a lawyer, questioning the validity of the found document. But he was surprised. His father's signature, the old notary's seal, and the witnesses' signatures spoke for themselves. Even if it wasn't recognized by modern justice, the truth had already done its work. It had cleansed Liam's soul and the village's view of him. You lost more than land, Marcelo, Sophia said as she watched him leave. You lost the chance to honor your own history. That day, Liam didn't gain an inheritance. He gained something greater, the right to be himself again, the man behind the myth, the living legend, who now had a name, a voice, and a home. 10. The return of the man who never left. The morning sun shone more intensely on that farm, which was no longer just land and fences, but living history, laden with memories and rebirths. Liam walked slowly through the field, smelling the wet earth, hearing the bird song, and feeling the warmth that finally thawed his chest. This was not the same man who arrived months ago, a stranger with a distant gaze and a shadowy past. This was a man who, despite everything, had never truly left. Sophia was on the porch watching. She knew that for Liam, that farm was more than just a patch of ground. It was a home rebuilt, brick by brick, gesture by gesture. That night they sat around the fireplace, the light dancing on the walls as the shadows brought forth stories from the past. Liam opened the old Santiago family photo album, retrieved from the attic, and pointed to an old picture. This was my father, strong, just, but also full of flaws. He wanted to protect his family, no matter the cost. Sometimes protections hurt more than wounds. Sophia smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. But he also left a legacy. You never let it be lost. I tried,
and you helped me remember that I'm not alone." They talked late into the night, sharing plans, dreams, and the common desire that this story wouldn't just be about loss, but about new beginnings. The next day, Liam made a decision that many expected, but few imagined he would have the courage to make. He called a meeting in the small village square. Friends, neighbors, and even those who had previously judged or ignored him gathered to hear what he had to say. With a firm voice, Liam spoke of forgiveness, of the invisible marks that time doesn't heal, and of the strength that is born from those who choose to continue, even when life seems to crumble. "I never stopped loving this land, these people," he said, "nor you. I just needed time to understand that the true treasure isn't in properties, but in the connections we create."
The crowd gave him a standing ovation. Sophia, from the sidelines, felt her heart overflow. She knew this was the moment Liam ceased to be merely a legend of the past and became the hero of the present. Months later, the farm pulsed with new life again. Plants sprouted in the formerly abandoned land, laughter echoed through the house's corridors, and in Liam's eyes, the serenity of someone who had finally found his place shone brightly. But what touched Sophia most was seeing that in that man who had once been a drifter and a stranger, there was now a whole man, capable of loving and being loved. The past had its scars, it's true, but Liam and Sophia proved that hope can heal the deepest wounds. And so, amidst the clinking of tools, the singing of birds, and the embrace of the earth, a new story was born. The story of a man who never truly left. And so, the story of Liam and Sophia teaches us that true home isn't just in the land we walk upon, but in the connections we build and the truths we choose to face. Liam, the man many judged as a lost wanderer, proved that courage isn't about running from the past, but confronting it head-on, with an open heart and a soul ready to begin anew. Sophia, with her faith and determination, was the light that guided Liam to redemption, showing that together, even the deepest wounds can heal. This is a story of hope, forgiveness, and love, a reminder that behind every legend, there is a person with dreams, fears, and the strength to change their destiny. If this story resonated with you, please like it and share it with anyone who needs to hear that it's never too late to start over.